Hi, I'm Phil Greenstreet from Rosco Digital Imaging in Los Angeles. I will be the moderator for this. I've just seen that I just had a message come up saying we'll begin in a minute. So does that mean we are beginning? Let's assume we've begun. I'm from Rosco in Los Angeles. We will be recording this and we will share the link to it afterwards with those who registered. We will also be taking questions throughout the session, which I will try to get to. Rosco makes a variety of products for filmmakers, including LED fixtures and backdrops, and puts us in a slightly unique position in that we find ourselves between the art department and the camera department. So it's nice to be able to have people from both ends of the world to come and join us on these webinars. Our panel today have also some experience in the global nature of Rosco. They had the temerity to attempt to shoot a television show working on 3 continents. And given that this year saw the 8th season of Homeland, I think it's fair to say that they actually pulled it off. John Kretschmer was there from nearly the beginning. He took over the show from production designing after Patti Podesta set the stage designing the highly successful pilot. Along the way, he picked up 3 nominations for the Art Directors Guild Excellence in Production Design Award. Prior to that, he worked on Dawson's Creek and One Tree Hill, and more recently designed the pilot for SEAL Team. So apparently for pretty much any hormone-based show, he's your guy. Dave Klein was a relative latecomer, joining the show in season 3, shooting a mere 57 episodes. So we can consider him a bit of a slacker, which seems appropriate, given that he started his career as cinematographer on Kevin Smith's Clerks, not only wielding the camera, but also appearing as low IQ video customer, among other characters.
It's appropriate.
Despite this, he became a member of the ASC in 2009, and more recently shot the Deadwood movie. The last member of the panel and alternate moderator, should I become indisposed during the next hour or so, is my colleague Sarah Horton. Sarah is a member of the British Film Designers Guild, and in her art directing days worked on features such as V for Vendetta, Snowden, Hannah, and appropriately enough for this forum, The International. Based in Berlin, Sarah now shoots the plates for SoftDrop all across Europe and, spoiler alert, North Africa. Stirring stuff indeed. Looks like it could have been a lot of fun, or it could have been absolute hell on earth. So, John, which of the two was it?
Let's speak over the course of the 8 seasons. It was always an enjoyable challenge, and due to the way the show was structured from the top down, we were empowered to make our own decisions and bring forth our best work. And therefore, overall, it was a very enjoyable thing. That being said, with each season, our challenges grew heavier and our ambitions grew larger. And that culminated in season 8, which was ultimately a very difficult show. And I think the only thing that really kept us together were these bonds and this great kind of family situation we had. I think that's what got us through. But season 8, without a doubt, was a tough one.
So where did you shoot season 8?
I got the phone call. Until you get the phone call from Michael Click, our producer, we have no idea where we're going or what story we're going to tell. And the phone rings ultimately, and you find out what you're going to do. And he said we needed that our plot would be based in Kabul, but that we'd also need Moscow and Doha and Washington D.C., all of the above. So we set out to scout, and Morocco came to the forefront. We had shot in Morocco twice before, and we went there with the idea of shooting Morocco for Kabul. But to do our due diligence, we also scouted Malta and Jordan just to be sure. And ultimately, we ended up in Casablanca to shoot for Kabul, which is an aberration for the Moroccan production teams, because their productions are mostly based in Ouarzazate. And the idea of mounting a show like Homeland in Casablanca actually required a bit of a migration of the local crew to come to Casablanca to shoot the streets of Casablanca, and also to do a fairly significant stage build. So we did most of it in Casablanca. And then along the way, we learned that some of our ambition for the mountain sequences we really couldn't pull off in Morocco. So we brought a significant amount of the work back to Los Angeles, ultimately.
Dave, I mean, would you consider going back to those locations again, or was it just
without a
bridge
doubt.
too far?
No, without a doubt. It was like Kretsch was saying, it was definitely a difficult show, but top down, it's a great group of people. And if it were not for that, I don't know that our core group would have stayed together as long as it had. We traveled the world. I started in season 3, which the first 3 seasons were in Charlotte. Season 3, we shot Charlotte, San Juan, Puerto Rico, actually all over Puerto Rico, and also Morocco. And then we did Berlin and Cape Town and New York and Richmond, and then Morocco again for the subsequent seasons. And so it was a challenge. It was like starting a new show every season, which is one of the things that kept it interesting. It also kept it pretty difficult, and like Kretsch was saying, that last season was one of the more difficult seasons, and partly because Casablanca had never had a full season of a TV show as big as ours. It's usually smaller shoots and a lot of bigger movies that bring everybody. We had traveled the world for all the subsequent seasons with about 15 people, and then this last year in Casablanca, I think we brought 150 with us, plus all the local crew from Ouarzazate. We basically exhausted the crew base that was there, and so we had to bring in from Europe and from the States and from Cape Town. We brought a few of our former crew members from Cape Town as well. It was tough. It was tough. But looking at that trailer, it's exciting. We did some pretty good work, I think.
Yeah. So Sarah, you got involved in season 5, right, in Berlin. How did that come about?
I met John at a barbecue. A colleague of mine, Stephen Bream, who was working with John on the show, and had invited me to his house, and so I went there, and we ended up getting into conversation and over a beer, I think, and a sausage. Yeah.
She quite simply said, "Do you need a backdrop?" And I said, "Heck yeah, I need a backdrop." And in season 4, we had a fairly miserable experience in Cape Town using a London-based supplier, and it was not good. And I got kind of fried on it from my line producer, because we spent a lot of money without good results. And then so it was a very opportune moment, and luckily Sarah, not only that, she had a really good product to offer, and so it was a great discovery right there in Steve Bream's backyard, without a doubt.
Yeah, no, it was indeed, and it was great for me because I was quite new to Rosco at that time, and it was just such a nice coincidence because I wasn't that up to speed on how to actually sell these things, and it was just great that you were so enthusiastic about it, and I
think desperate is the word you're looking for there.
It's true, and the best part is I could bicycle 1 kilometer from my office to the production plant and actually see the backdrop come off the line.
Yes. Nice. Yeah.
So did you guys run into any trouble in Berlin? Because I mean, you've got Herr Kretschmer and Herr Klein. So were there any assumptions of linguistic ability that just aren't there, or are you both fluent German speakers I just wasn't aware of?
You want to go first, Klein?
My German is non-existent, but luckily, pretty much everybody in Berlin speaks pretty good English. So that wasn't the trouble, and I'll be honest, I had a great time in Berlin, and because one of the reasons was because it was the first season where we were shooting a city for itself. You know, Charlotte had been DC, Puerto Rico had been Caracas. You know, the first time in Morocco, that I was there, which was the second time, was Tehran. You know, Cape Town was Kabul and various and Islamabad. So Berlin was the first time we were shooting a city as itself. So it allowed us to get really wide, you know, wider than we ever had before, because, you know, with budget limitations and schedule limitations, you know, Kretsch was sometimes only able to address that street and that street. You know what I mean? So the other two directions we couldn't really shoot because all of a sudden we're in Cape Town or in San Juan, whatever it is. But Berlin, we were free to go 360 and just get super wide and show the city off as itself. So it was great, and that was where actually Kretsch introduced me to this Rosco SoftDrop, and I think it was hugely important there, because one of the things, I think the reason that we weren't so successful in Cape Town was because we just had a really reflective backdrop, and the biggest problem with that is that you need space. You need space with the reflective backdrop, because all of a sudden you're fighting reflections, and so you have to, you know, the lighting and the grip, it gets bigger. You know, it takes up more space. And so with the soft drop, we didn't need all that space because we had no reflections to deal with. And so I was really excited about that drop, because we were at Studio Babelsberg, and the stages that we were on, and I think all of them really are not huge. So our space was somewhat limited. But I think we were pretty successful with that first drop and the following drops too.
Glad to hear that. So what are the other challenges of shooting such an international series? I mean, does it mean that you're more driven to use stage rather than locations? Or do you feel that you have to go out and use the locations that you're given because, you know, you've paid so much to be there? Has it changed the mentality on that?
Well, what I'd say, like, you know, and I'll go back to Berlin, you know, yes, we're shooting Berlin for Berlin, but I was adamant at that point, no postcard shots, you know, no Brandenburg Gates, no, I want to see the backside of Berlin. And I remember when I landed, I was sleep deprived in the plane flight, and the location manager, I think, or one of the guys down taking me back to my hotel, wanted to give me a grand tour. I could barely keep my eyes open. He was showing me all the iconic things, and I was like, that's fine, but that's not the show I want to shoot. And ultimately I think we did show the real Berlin, and I think that's been our onus, is really to find reality, to find whether we're creating it or finding it, is to make it to our best ability to look like the art department did nothing. That was really the goal. And if you really go back to the genesis of the series, and I'll credit Michael Cuesta for it, and Patty, the work is, when we were shooting our first season, you know, when you have a choice of location and one is more interesting and one is less interesting, Michael Cuesta would pick the less interesting location. And I said, wow, this is new. This is exciting. You know, this is great. Plain walls are fine, you know, or mundane is great. And I think what it does is it lets the actors come to the forefront. It gives Dave Klein a little bit more work to do to shape the set a little bit better with light. And ultimately I think that's really the look that we kept and maintained to a certain extent throughout Homeland, although we did more from it towards the end because the show needed to grow in other directions as well. And I think David and with Leslie, Linka Glatter, they did a great job of taking the show to new places in the later seasons in terms of cinematography and the way we approached our set design.
I would agree with Kretsch, and you know, just like he was saying about the art department, you know, Kretsch and I are both, with our departments and all the departments working together, we're basically charged on this show with being invisible. You know, if people look at a set and say, oh my God, that's a great set, or look at the lighting and say, oh my God, that's great lighting, we have failed. I think we have failed. Right. You know, it's got to be seamless. You know, I took over from Nelson Craig in season 3, and Nelson and I have a very different style of working, but the intent was the same. it's got to look real. It's got to feel, you know, it's got to feel gritty and just absolutely real. And I don't know exactly how Nelson did it, but I'll do it. And throughout all the seasons that I was there, I would do it by, you know, walking into a location, and if it looks right, we shoot it. And if it requires a hell of a lot of work, we do that too. But the ultimate goal is always to be invisible and serve the story. One of the interesting parts for me was learning how the different, you know, grip and electric crews work all over the world. You know, everywhere. I think the United States is the only place. The United States and Canada is the only place that I've been that uses our system, where it's the grip and electric, and they both do the lighting. Whereas, you know, in Cape Town and all over Europe and Morocco, and I've been in Mexico City, not on this show, but they all use the European system where the electricians are doing all the lighting and the grips are camera support. And depending on where you are, sometimes the grips are tenting. In Berlin, the construction department was tenting, which was brilliant. So it's just getting to know all these different systems and working in them, and that's part of being a new show, you know, every season.
Does that?
Sorry, go on.
No, I was wondering if that applies to art departments as well. I mean, is there a great variety in methodology? I mean, Sarah, obviously between London and Germany, but John, all the places you've been.
I'm going to say really the only place I felt that has a unique art department set up is New York City. And and I'll tell you the coolest thing, you know, driving or flying all the way to the other side of the world to Cape Town. And my Guy Potgieter, my art director there, we grew up in completely different cultures, completely opposite end of the planet. And professionally, and the way we conduct our work, it's as if we grew up in the same bedroom. We had the same hand signals. And so I think there's a real consistency to the art department, because we're the kind of the weirdos anyway. You know, we have to bring such a host of odd and untrained skills to the table. But I was absolutely impressed with how similar our motives are, and our ambitions are, and our methods, no matter where we went. Berlin was fantastic in that we came in with Homeland, and I think it's purported that Homeland was the very first American television series to shoot there. Not only that, it's Homeland. Not only that, we just really built up a tremendous amount of momentum in Cape Town due to the efficiencies there. The crews there were very good. The economics were very affordable, so we really got big. Boom, we land in Berlin, and we were telling these guys, you got to watch out, guys. This is not going to be a fair experience. You know, you have no idea how fast and how far we're going to run. And Berlin did a great job of just scaling up. Instead, for example, Yesham Zolan was our decorator, and she had 3 decorators working underneath her. And that's the scale up that the show required. And they did it in construction and everything. And we hit our marks. And so a very impressive job Berlin did. And then but in New York, and the reason why kind of New York's different is that set dressing in particular just does a tremendous amount of work, and props does a tremendous amount of, covers a lot of work that in other areas production units do, or other non-art departments do. That's what makes New York unique.
I think there's 2 different systems, aren't there, for the prop the props is I think art departments are the same, but props is different. There's an American system for props and prop masters, right, and there's this UK European one, and I don't quite know how they work. What was that?
There's somebody after you.
An ambulance went by. Yeah, that was me. They're after
the SWAT team arriving.
There's also. Sarah, I'll just take that one step further. There's also, you know, the U.S. version of, or the Los Angeles version of the prop department, and the New York version of the prop department, right, which is much, much bigger. You know, props take on cars. You know, the picture cars are props, and so that's very different too.
Yes,
right. The only time in our 8 seasons, there's only one time we had to go with the English system, or it was either when in Morocco, season 8. We had the English system. A delightful gang came down from the UK to do set deck and props, and that was the new system. You know, where the prop master, you know, kind of takes the lead, and they share their hand prop and set dressing modes. and we got through it. But it was difficult for our line producer to sort it out. You know, I'm familiar with it from my experience, but Michael Click was not familiar with that system. So it took a little bit of getting used to.
So could I ask a question about the crew in Morocco, because I worked ages ago there, and they're fantastically professional. I had that. Obviously, they have a experience of other big shows, big American movies go there to get made. I wonder how you found that working with the crew there. I know that you built a lot of you built some big sets there, which I saw when I came to take the plate shots for the backdrops.
Yeah, and I'll be the first to admit I probably dreamed too big. It was, you know, it's our final season of Homeland. I really wanted to even let the art department evolve a little bit. Let's really kind of be ambitious. I knew kind of along the way working with Dave, I said big windows, you know, quality of light into the sets is I think is part of our success. So we handed Morocco a huge challenge. We had to rebuild the entire West Wing, including the Oval Office. And in that situation, the classic old world skills of the Moroccans came to the forefront. They set up a staff shop, and they hand carved all the molds for the Oval Office in the West Wing. So those kind of great, you know, abilities were there. And then in the Kabul station, the CIA Kabul station, I just dreamed that the space really afforded us a really big, grand space. And having done a really nice, big, airy space in Cape Town, we kind of went for it again, and we went right up to the edge of our ability, and just really barely cranked it out. And in hindsight, probably should have scaled down a little bit, but nonetheless, the crew pulled it off. They brought all the skills and talent needed to do that work, and very fortunately, they did it all safely. We didn't have a single lost time accident the entire run, and we had and that's about 150,000 hours of work to fill those two stages in Casablanca.
Excellent.
Good record.
Yeah, for me it was I think more of a kind of a numbers game. We had you know, I've traveled this whole time on Homeland with mainly one person, my focus puller, because he's very important to me. His name's Dominic Meinl. This last season, I also traveled with a Steadicam operator, John Joyce, and the rest of the crew we tried to source locally, but I think we just exhausted who was available. You know, we were, like I said, we were bringing crew from Warszawa. We were using everybody that was in Casa, and we kind of exhausted it. So we ended up bringing our grips were from Berlin for the most part. You know, it was half from Berlin, half locals from Casablanca. The electricians came from London. You know, they came from the UK, and again, it was half London, half Casa, and you know, our camera department was a melting pot. But also with the equipment, you know, John did go big, and when he goes big, I have to go big on stage. And so, you know, we put this Lee Knight, my gaffer, and I, we put our lighting package together, and it ended up being something like 2 or 3 giant storage containers, or shipping containers, sorry, coming from the UK. And I remember saying at one point, well, what about all the gear in Warszawa? And they said, well, we've already shipped all that here. So there wasn't enough cable, you know, in Morocco. So all our cable was coming from the UK as well for those stages. Ultimately, you know, I don't know where it fell budget wise, but ultimately I think we did pull it off, and I'm glad you went so big, Kretsch.
Thank you. You know, people go to Morocco to shoot outside. People don't go to Morocco to build enormous sets on stage.
Yeah.
And so that was the learning curve. That was the friction of just learning to do that. And but nonetheless, they have the skills, and we're able to do it.
Cool. We've got a message for the two of you from Wayne Shields, the gaffer from Cape Town, who says hi. Great to see you both.
Hi, Wayne.
Hey, Wayne.
So, as the show progressed, did you find that you were transitioning more from actual location work to stage work? I mean, one of the questions that's come in was, other than turning an abandoned gas station in Charlotte into an Afghan mountain hideout, was there another particularly challenging transformation of space that you encountered?
Well, I'll tell you, Berlin. You know, we land in Berlin, and we've got to build some pretty sophisticated interiors. You know, a high-end kind of glass and steel headquarters on stage, and find our locations. But also, in our first couple episodes, we had to do a 20-acre Syrian refugee camp in Berlin. And we shot out at Rudersdorf. So those are the challenge we're kind of given. Is there's everything's on our plate, and what happens often is just finding when is it worth. You got to find that mark, when is it worth the build. In my opinion, on it's more efficient and more affordable to build. May be very different from Michael Click, our executive producer's opinion, and that's when he and I have to spar and fight things out. And but usually we find that middle ground, and I guess the best way to say it is we have a unique and enough nice collaborative process to where we can find the best decision. Do we build it? Do we find a location? And everything's thrown at us. So at any given point, we're having to make these decisions throughout the season.
Yeah, I'll also say that one of the challenges, you know, more for Kretsch than for me, was almost everywhere we went, with the exception of everywhere this show went, with the exception of New York and Berlin, didn't have the stage space for us. So we were building stages out of warehouses, or Kretsch was building stages out of warehouses, and that's a pretty big undertaking. You know, I remember in Cape Town. God, I'm nervous now that I know that Wayne Shields is watching. In Cape Town, we had a lot of space. It was great. I also remember in Richmond, we took over, what was that, Kretsch? It was an old IRS storage facility or something. It was a massive space. It was huge. But once he started building sets, and I'm trying to figure out where all the lights are going, I find out I can't hang lights in here. And I said, come again.
There was zero load on the ceiling.
Yeah, so we ended up building, you know, truss systems, and we had towers surrounding all these sets. And luckily that space was so big that it could accommodate that. But it was a new challenge every place we went. I got to say, a funny, you know, going back to this being a new show every time, and also in another country or another state every time, you're hiring a lot of people off of Zoom. Well, Zoom wasn't around at the time. You're hiring people off of FaceTime, whatever it is. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, because, you know, when you're in a room with somebody, you know, okay, I can work with this person. You don't really get that, you know, in this kind of environment. So I hired Wayne Shields. Hi, Wayne. And I show up in Cape Town the first day. You know, I look at him, and he's got a lot of great credits. He's a hell of a gaffer, but I didn't know that yet. And I look at him, he's very young for all his credits. And we start talking. So I said something about a C-stand, and he goes, whoa, what's a C-stand? And I do that, and he goes, I'm just fucking with you, mate. We're gonna get along just fine.
Yeah.
So sometimes it works out very, very well.
So sorry.
Go on, it's okay.
Well, I was thinking, apart from the roof loading issues, were there any other sort of weird regulations that you came across in the various places that would influence the way that you had to shoot, or those came as a surprise when you already had your methodology sorted?
Well, I would say that the biggest thing is almost continuous. And I will say this too, we shot this show over a decade, and the industry evolved over the decade that we were shooting this. And I think the first time when we landed in Berlin, they are very methodic process for getting locations approved, permitting process. And we, you know, typically on Homeland, we prep an episode hardcore for about 2 weeks prior to we shoot it. So we need everything to be figured out in about 2 weeks. Location scouted, permitted, ready to shoot. And in a town like Berlin, and not too different from other cities as well is the industry. They're nowhere near that. They're a 4 to 6 week kind of approval process. So we move so fast. We always had to push up against what became known as the authorities in Berlin and other kind of just pushback in other areas that we went. And the other evolution that happened during these 10 years of shooting Homeland, the amount of television production has grown to unprecedented proportions worldwide. So the big challenge anywhere you go, I don't care what it is locations, being able to get any location. New York is very difficult to find locations. It's so busy. And but I've also found that it's everywhere. And it's the product is the amount of production. So that was the biggest difficulties I always had was finding locations. And ideally and historically, you always wanted to give your director 3 choices. But I can almost assure you more often than not, in the final 3 or 4 years of Homeland, we could take Leslie Lincoln-Glatter 1 choice. You know, we just couldn't have another. And even if she couldn't envision what my ideas were, what we would do, we'd have to gain that trust and say, Leslie, this is our location. We're going to make it work. And ultimately, we could bring it to the table, and Klein could come in and bring it home. You know, lighting wise.
So I have a question. So how far in advance from shooting did you get the scripts? Because, or were all the scripts finished before you know, or was it just a storyline? And then the scripts you were given during the course of the shooting the season? And if so, how far ahead, how much prep time did you have?
I'll make a quick comment, then I'll let Klein chime in. When we start a season, we have absolutely no idea how it's going to end whatsoever. We'll get outlines for about 3 to 4 episodes to get us going, and then we're learning as we go, as the outlines come out. Historically, the outlines did tend to match the scripts, so we could plan accordingly. But when we set out season 8, we had not a clue where we were going. The writers didn't have a clue. I think they've written as such, but I'll let Klein chime in on that.
Yeah, Kretsch is right, and it's usually based on some outlines in the beginning, and you know, even an outline of the entire season of where this is going to go. But a good example, I think, is Cape Town, where we were supposed to spend a lot of time in these pretty elaborate and enormous sets that Kretsch was building, and by episode 3, we were a road show. You know, we were, and it was just because the story had taken another turn. You know, in the writer's room, they decided that we're not going to go this way, we're going to go this way. And so that had changed. And we were a roadshow for maybe almost entirely, you know, 6 or 8 episodes where we'd be on stage 1 day per episode. And so at that point, you know, Kretsch just had to build these sets based on an outline. And then somebody's coming after you, man, I swear. And then we were there 1 day every 2 weeks for a while, and you know, I think we ended up coming back for a couple episodes towards the end, for a lot of stage work, but we were a total roadshow for a while. That's one of the things that I mean, it's just the way it happens, you know, unless you have every script for a season of television, you know, you don't know where it's going to go. Yeah. It's pretty organic, and it changes as you go along.
And in New York, and Phil, I see you have the New York backdrop behind you there. Yeah. We had these, you know, Homeland the writers do such a really good job of writing the headlines, you know, and writing not only that, but the headlines that are happening when the show's airing. They had this great ability to stay ahead of the news. And then in New York in 2016, we had a very surprise election, and that required the writers to reboot that season. And so for me in the art department, about middle of the season, we did have a road plan where we were going set wise. And however, we got a whole new list of things we needed to build for season 6. The other thing I'll say is, very fortunately on Homeland, there was never a lot of pushback I never really felt unreasonable restraints on the budget. We took these scripts, we basically, did our best job to put them forth. One of the best parts is the writers empowered us to make the decisions on the front line. Michael Click, the directors, whoever's involved. And so we always had the ability to maneuver and to accomplish these goals, even when the ball was moving, with the exception of season 8. And when we got towards the end of season 8, and we had to bring a lot of work back to Los Angeles, we did start getting some serious pushback. And we started having those serious conversations in the conference rooms that we had never had before in Homeland. Heated debates because the money got tight, got super duper tight. And that was and we got through it, but that was a new quality at the end of Homeland that we had to deal with.
Is budget that something that your departments are equally aware of, or do you find that the camera department tends to sort of just be able to run with it, but the art department's given a very strict budget and has to account for every penny, or is it a bit more free form, or does it vary from show to show?
I think it varies show to show. It also varies, on Homeland, it varied season to season. And I know Kretsch is somewhat in charge of his budget. The cinematographer has never been in charge of the camera grip or electric budgets, probably for good reason, because they'd put it all into the camera department or something. I don't know. But the camera department is budget-wise is usually pretty fixed. Sometimes we'll add a camera, sometimes we'll add this or that, but it's generally pretty fixed. For me, it's the grip and electric that changes quite a lot. And I'll just give an example from this last season of Morocco. We shot in an old prison that had been, it had been unoccupied for at least 30 years. So there were a lot of safety issues that we had to deal with, but there were also, we had these hallways with all these windows, and they could not be accommodated by the equipment that we had already in the country. And so I ended up, did some math and got together with Lee Knight. Okay, well, we need 25 4Ks to come in here, and they got to come from London, and all the ancillary, the cable and everything's got to come too. And Michael Click, who's our line producer, executive producer, he was also directing that episode. And so he sees it, and we're on a scout at this location. Luckily, we were there, and he's like, you need all these lights? And I said, Michael, look at all these windows where we want to shoot. I said, I can use bigger lights. He goes, no. But like any good line producer, he loves to save money, but he's also, even if he wasn't the director of that episode, he also sees when something is absolutely necessary, and he'll agree to it.
Yeah, he's very fair, I think, in that regard. I'm going to say I'm very fortunate as a designer. I've been able to wean myself away from worrying about the budget, and for almost the entire run of Homeland, I don't worry about the budget until Michael Click comes busting in my door, and then we'll figure out how to fix it. And it's very fortunate, I hope I can just bring an intuitive sense. I want to be a pragmatic in that regard. And however, that did all change in our last couple of episodes. We really had a tough time to buckle down and really figure out how to do this, but not giving up the ambition. And we could not, not bring home the ending that the writers wanted. But we really felt the pain at that point. And that was the first time in my entire run of Homeland that I felt the pain, those last couple episodes.
So David, does it get confusing having different crew on each season? I mean, do you find yourself saying, "Hey, Wayne," and realizing that you're now in Berlin and it's some other guy? And I mean, or do you just automatically just sort of drop into the same relationship with the new guys and off you go again?
It is just a learning process, and it's getting to know everybody. And it's like I said earlier, you're hiring people off of Skype or off of FaceTime or whatever it is, and then you get there and you find out, well, some of that works and some of it doesn't. I've been pretty fortunate, over all the seasons to have hired some really great people, and that's one of the reasons I take Dominic Mino with me everywhere, because I don't want to worry about the camera department. You worry about the camera department, you worry about the gear, you know what I need, and the manpower issue we deal with together. I hire the operators, he hires the assistants, that sort of thing. That's one thing I just don't want to worry about, because I have my hands full, you know, getting to know a new crew and sometimes a new system of working as far as the grip and electric goes. But Phil, I think you just, it's like starting a new show. I keep saying that, but it is. It's like starting a new show. And even if you're shooting in LA and you're used to using the same crew all the time, that changes. You know, your gaffer, your key grip, they get booked on something else. You know, your schedules get malaligned, misaligned, and so all of a sudden you have a new crew here as well. So it's just part of the business. It's being carnies. We're carnies, and you just get to know the new carnies every time. I'm the carny with the light meter.
I think that's always been the case on every production. That's what makes it kind of so exciting, is that you work so closely and very intensely with people, and then it all goes away and you meet your new family and work with them in an equally intense way.
That's right. And sorry, were you finished there? I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, no, I have, yeah.
Another thing that I've found over the years is, you know, just to surround yourself with people who you're going to learn something from, people who have more experience than you or know something you don't know, and you just have to surround yourself with really experienced, really good people, and you've got to be able to get along with them, because we're going to be doing this for 7 months, you know. So that's very important too.
Yeah, I think, you know, when a show like Homeland, and it's not untypical of any kind of American episodic, when I meet decorators and I said, look, you need to figure this stuff out yourself. I said, I will hand down notes on a set that I will not see until it airs, because I'm in the scout van all the time. So I like that creatively. I want a broader input. I want other people's ideas. And it's just a fine line of just making sure that the show doesn't go off the rails. But every step of the time, I'll tell these guys, look, you got to have the ability to finish these sets on your own and communicate with the director directly. And I like to empower them to do that. And I want people that want to take that responsibility. And then the best part, I think, on Homeland is when we collected these crews throughout the continents and many, many places. And once you're in that club, you know what it is. You know the Homeland, what it means. And I think it's across the board. You know, I'd love to get these guys together, but they have ultimate respect for someone who's done the job because they know it and they understand it. And that's been the coolest thing, to be together and sort of create the sort of club of people that have done, I think, what's a pretty amazing show over the years.
That's very cool. That's very cool. I like the idea of someone who worked on Homeland in South Africa meeting someone who worked on Homeland another season in Berlin, and then instantly having a connection.
In Morocco, we had that. Had my art director from Cape Town. We had our own set dresser, Mina from Berlin. We had set designers from New York and LA. And so it is nice when they come together, and it's saying this like we all been working together, you know, many, many years.
But do you miss that once it's gone? I mean, is one of the things I've found in this even more intense set of circumstances is Camera Image, the Cinematographer's film festival, where for 1 week each year a bunch of you get together and all you're doing is basically watching film and drinking vodka, and then that finishes, it's done, and you go back to your regular life. And then, you know, a few days later, you get this real pang of where did it go? Because although it was only a very short period, it's so intense that you sort of you've become accustomed to it. So when you're with people for 7 months, that must be so much worse, unless you hate their guts. In which case, yeah.
Well, there's always that weird cousin you have in your family that you just can't wait to get away from. But it is a, you know, you create a family every time, and there's always that feeling of loss when it's done. And you know, I gotta say, as busy as we get sometimes, you move on to the next job so quickly. And I was fortunate enough to almost always do something in between seasons of Homeland, and so sometimes you move on to that next thing so quickly that oh well, okay, this is my new family, you know, I guess I'm with you guys now, and it kind of it allows you to get over that feeling of loss a little quicker, but it's always there. It's always there, man. You know, you can't spend 7 months with people that you enjoy being with, and then all of a sudden it's done and not have an emotional response to that.
And on the even, I think a much longer term is, you know, what I call our little scout van family, you know, which is Michael Click, Leslie Linka-Glatter, Sunday Stevens, and the other ADs, and myself, and the teamster, the driver, who's all important. We spent 10 years, you know, or, you know, to a certain extent, driving around together. You know, the scouting, we scouted for a full month at least for season 8 of Homeland. That's, you know, a month of driving around 3 across in the backseat of a van, you know, with these folks. And the fact that I guess they don't teach in film school, but, you know, it's one thing to be a great production designer or capable production designer. It's another thing to have van etiquette. You know when to tell the joke, know when to shut up, know when to, you know, and all that kind of thing. There's a professional responsibility that you have to bring to these vans. But that family, we held together. We did great, and made it through. And I do miss them. You know, I do. We had some really enjoyable times, and we have a ton of inside jokes and all that kind of stuff that we developed over the years. I do miss that crowd, definitely.
How do you feel, or did you feel anything special after the Last Slate was shot? Or was it a special feeling, or was it?
Well, you know, I was probably the first one to say that I was ready to be done, because it was such a hard show, and we traveled so much. And you know, especially that last season was not only really difficult, it was also really long, because we normally would spend 7 months in a country and then we're done with the show. We spent 7 months in, I think, I spent 7 months in Morocco shooting, and then we came back and shot for another, what 3 months, Kretsch, in LA. So it was a really long season, and I was pretty cooked. I was ready to be done. But having said that, the last thing we shot was driving around. I think we were in Northridge, and we were just doing some shots of Claire driving the car. So we had her on a process trailer, and I had spent so much time with a camera on my shoulder in a car with Claire over the last, you know, 6-7 seasons that I actually got choked up a little bit when we were shooting that last shot of her in the car. Even though it was a process trailer, we weren't in the car with her, but you know, I went from I'm done with this to like, oh my God, it's over. So
nice story.
And as I should be as a production designer, I was nowhere near that last shot, because they were shooting at night, and the hills were on fire.
yes,
I was at the part where I go, oh, y'all good? I got dinner plans. Have a nice night. It's a wrap.
So would you do it again? Would you sign up for another show that looks like it's going to run 8 seasons, or is it
you
just?
You don't know that, Phil.
Yeah.
You don't know that. Season 1, we didn't know what we had made really as we were making it. So you never know. But the people were interesting. That really, I had nothing to go on. And you read a script, what's it going to become? But meeting Alex Ganza and Michael Click, you know, at the Fox studio, and just seeing these really cool, genuine people, that, you know, it was, you know, a wonderful blessing to get picked to do the job.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll be honest.
I don't know how you are with this. I mean, my ability to predict successful shows is awful. I mean, if I've worked on something that I'm super proud of, chances are it's going to be it may not even make it to broadcast. It may just end up on the cutting room floor. I mean, do you actually did you have a feeling on season 1 that, or season 2 or 3, did you feel that, oh my God, this is something really special and this is going to just keep going?
What made it special is, like I told you, Michael Cuesta was the creative director at the time. He was making very interesting choices of locations. He was setting a style and something that was new and unique for me. Mundane, plain, ordinary, you know, as a direction, as an art direction. So that I felt really good about. And then the second part is what I learned right off the bat, was that the folks in Los Angeles, the writers, were pretty much hands off. They were letting Michael Click, the director, and myself make the choices of what we wanted to do and present them. And that's, I can't tell you how beneficial that situation is. So I think the elements were there, the processes were there, were certainly creative and conducive to a successful show. So if I felt it that way. I felt that the process was amazing. That these guys were letting us run, they were throwing us these great, interesting challenges. And then certainly seeing Claire, you know, her rendition of Carrie Matheson emerge during this season, and you learn what this is all about. You started feeling it, but really we had no idea, I think, until we got really quite a few nominations and stuff, I think, in that first season, and won the Golden Globe. I think the show won a Golden Globe. But I say it's the people, and it goes back, and the fish stinks from the head down. You know, Howard Gordon and Alex Ganza, they set the tone to make this show in a way that really helped the show in general.
I actually had a lot more to go on because I came in season 3, so I had 2 seasons of the show to look at, and you know, they had 2 successful seasons for me to evaluate before coming on. And I had 2 great conversations when I started the show. I remember being in Charlotte, and the first conversation was with Alex Ganza, and I just wanted to know. I said, "Hey, Alex, just tell me, who do I answer to in terms of the lighting of this show?" And he just looked me right in the eye and he said, "You answer to yourself," which was amazing and terrifying all at the same time, because you're left to your own devices at that point, and you know, the buck stops here basically. And then a few days later, I had a conversation with Claire Danes where I just sat down with her and I wanted to know if she had a particular way she liked working with a cinematographer, or if she knew, you know, what lenses she liked to be photographed with, what kind of lighting, that sort of thing. And she just said, "Dave, you know, I have no idea how you guys do what you do, but I really appreciate it when you're good at it, so you can light me however you like." And that, you know, was just, that was amazing. You know, I've never had that experience with many other, or any other actors before. So she was a dream to work with.
That was the tone throughout. That was the general idea. And I have my department the same way. I want them to figure it out. You know, my MO with a decorator: hire the best decorator you can, get out of their way. You know, let them do their job. You know, and I think
that's quite unique. I mean, what you're both describing is something that doesn't actually happen on a lot of series, and it's very interesting. It just sounds like it's a wonderful set of circumstances, and then it's in, you know, maybe that's also one of the reason for its success, because you were given that freedom to run with it.
Right.
And trust. It's about trust, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's built on.
And I think there were certain checks and balances on the way. I think, you know, Michael Click was really a conduit to make sure between us and production and the writers, and but he had the meeting, so we didn't. And he was very good at again letting the ship go, make sure we're staying, you know, on course, but letting everyone just have a good time doing it more than anything. And bring forth your best ideas, no matter where you are on the ladder. You know, bring your A game. It's fucking Homeland.
Okay, so we're getting a lot of love for you too from various people: Bob Newcomb, Tom Priestley,
Holy
Andrew
cow.
McCarthy. So we're getting to the end. We've got another couple of minutes to go. What's next for you two? Within the limits of your NDAs, what are you up to next? A minute each, I guess.
You want to go first, Klein, or?
Sure. I signed a pretty serious NDA for this one. All I can say is that I've been virtual scouting from home for the last couple of weeks on a show that is hopeful to be shooting in November or so. And it's a series, and it's here in LA. So I feel fortunate. You know, that it's rare that a cinematographer can do anything from home that's even remotely like scouting. So that's been a great part of this process, the new version of the process.
And I landed in Chicago on March 9th to start a new series for AMC called 61st Street. Peter Moffat's the showrunner. and Chicago shut down a week later on March 17th. And we decided to stay there and work remotely. So I actually had this kind of weird experience of being shut down in Chicago and drawing a whole new set with a pretty extensive build. And so I had an art director, a couple of set designers, and decorators spread all over, and we had to learn to do the Zoom meetings. And we produced a body of work to fill up 2 very large stages. And we're just now figuring out how to start prep on August 3rd with an extended build, but not even really planning to go to camera until January or February.
Oh,
So
wow.
we're learning the ropes of this COVID style, but we have a Homeland style build, a really, really large build on stage. And we got to figure out how to do it with these new rules and regulations upon us. So and we're about to embark on that as we speak. So wonderful challenge ahead.
Yeah.
And I may be doing most of it from my home here in the Blue Ridge Mountains. I may do the entire build remotely, and that's what the show is going to require.
And Sarah, as we're here, I know Sarah's been busier than any of us. Berlin has opened up again, so I think she's shot like 4 shows in the last 4 weeks.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's business as usual, not quite, but almost here. I think we're lagging. We're a little bit ahead of America. So, but yes, it's nice to have a camera back in the hand again and doing some more backdrop photography.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you all very much. That was a great session. I enjoyed the heck out of it.
A lot of fun. Enjoyed it.
By the comments, I think the audience did too. So thanks, and good luck with the future projects.
Excellent. Thanks.
Thank you all. Good to see you, David, Phil, and Sarah.
You too, Kretsch. See you guys. Thanks.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.